All right, here we go. Okay, everybody. So tonight, important topic, four key obstacles to university success and how to help your teen avoid them. I'm Mitchell Gray, and I'm the senior instructor for university preparation programs at UBC Extended Learning. A big part of my job is I deliver a series of lectures and other university preparation events for students in our big flagship extended learning program called Future Global Leaders. If you haven't heard of Future Global Leaders, check it out. It's a great program, and we're going to have more than 1,200 teens from around the world coming to UBC campus this summer. So if it's of interest to you or for your teen or by the way, when I say your teen, I mean if you're a parent, guardian, mentor, counselor, whatever, uh, uh, check that out, Future Global Leaders. So, but basically, my job and my role is I want to do as much as I can to help high school students prepare for university. And I'm always looking for opportunities to do that. So recently I was thinking, I don't get to talk to parents a lot. I talk to students often, but I want to talk to parents more. So I thought, just as a pilot, see how it goes. I thought I'm gonna take a few hours. I'm gonna put together a couple of sessions, a couple lectures, and I thought to myself, what if I had like 2 hours? What would I, what things would I tell parents that would best help them support their teens as they transition to university? And so I came up with these two topics. We talked about AI 2 weeks ago. If you were here 2 weeks ago, welcome back. Thank you so much for coming again. And then tonight, these what I call four key obstacles to university success. Uh, we can also spin that more positively because really we're going to focus on the how to overcome those obstacles. So I'm hoping that this material is just simply interesting for you, but also that at some point it helps you have support your team, have a talk with them if they're struggling, or better yet, prevent them from struggling by talking about these things in advance, or just simply kind of when they start conversations, maybe you'll have a little better awareness of some of the challenges that they're facing at university. Okay, so you know uh, why I chose this topic in particular is simply because so many students struggle unnecessarily, and there's things called the hidden curriculum, which basically the name says it all. It's not the courses, it's not the tests, but it's the hidden parts of university life that you have to do well to really thrive in university. And honestly, professors almost never talk about that stuff. And high school teachers almost never talk about most of this, or they do it in kind of a superficial way. And I don't mean that to insult them. I just mean that they don't necessarily have the time to dig into it as much as they should. So these, in my opinion, I've been an instructor for quite a while. I was a student for a long time, and these are things that I think students need to know, but they're not really getting it elsewhere. So I hope it's useful for you. And because the more university is overwhelming, and once they get there, it's a huge challenge. And the more prepared they are before they get there, it really, really helps. And one of the reasons I think I may have some unique things to share on these topics is because I've learned from the highs and the lows. In fact, as you know, if you were here 2 weeks ago, the first two post-secondary institutions I went to, I failed out of and dropped out of. But once I developed better student strategies, I went on in my undergraduate to win the top award at University of Calgary in my faculty. So I've really seen the kind of confidence crushing, time and money wasting side of lacking student skills, and I've also seen what can happen when you really have the skills that you need to thrive in university. And of course, since then, I've continued to build on that through instructing and tons of research. And sometimes I wish I could go back because when I started doing well in my undergrad, I did really well. But now I know I could do much better because of the things I'm going to share with you. So I hope it's useful. Okay. Now, so because I'm trying to be a responsible user of AI, I'm modeling good AI use. So I've included a brief transparency declaration here. By the way, I'm going to send you these slides, and I'm going to also send you a link to this recording and a short survey. But it's absolutely perfect that you're here because I think it's never as good just to look at the slides, but I will. It's always better to be here live and hear me talking about it and ask questions. But just so you're aware, I will be sending these slides to you. Um, so I just, as a responsible AI user, and this is something that I model for the students all the time. I want to be clear and open about how I used AI whenever I use it, and I used it. In very helpful ways here, but not in really kind of fundamental ways. I used AI to create the slides and the formatting. And I did ask ChatGPT for feedback on a couple of the slides I had already written. But aside from those rather limited ways, I just want to make it clear that I did not use AI to write any of this material or to conduct any of the research. What I just did just there is really important for students to get better at talking about how they use AI. And so I'm trying to model that behavior. I know it's parents here tonight, but it's things that you can share. So in our time together, as I said, I promised I'm not going to go beyond 1 hour, but that's going to give us a lot of chance to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the symptoms of struggle that students have, the ways that we know that students are struggling needlessly. We're going to talk about those 4 key obstacles. And most of all, we're going to talk about ways, skills and mindsets that can help students overcome them. So obviously it's a huge, huge topic. And what can we really do in 1 hour on that? Well, I think we can do something meaningful. I think, by breaking these kind of challenges and obstacles into 4 kind of clear categories, that's already an important start and allows you to kind of think of which category your student may be or your teen may be struggling in. And to whatever extent you're able to share some of these ideas or just use them to talk with your student now while they've still got 1 or 2 years before university, it gives them a chance to do what I call time plus effort, which is to make small changes now and consistently that in a year or two turn into something amazing. And so, one idea you might have is to uh, pick and choose, take 1 or 2 meaning of the things that most resonate with you from tonight and kind of make those your focus and support your teen however you see fit. Okay, so I just want to say something about the slides. There's a ton of material in these slides. I'm not even going to try to get through it all because the fourth obstacle is like lifestyle vulnerabilities. That's also really important. But for those ones, they're really straightforward, and I've kind of outlined the problem and then outlined like one great step to take to help toward a solution. And for that category, it's pretty easy to get everything from the slides. So I'm not even going to attempt to get through those parts of the lecture because I want to focus the attention where it's most needed. So the 4 key obstacles, what are they? There's lots of things challenging about university, but in my experience, these are the things that I want students and parents to know above and beyond everything else. This is not about the sort of things like taking good notes, the fundamental things like that. Those things are super important, but it's easy to find people who are talking about that. I want to talk about things that, again, are a little bit hidden, a little bit mysterious, but absolutely important. So we're going to talk about unexpected rigor, which is just the simple fact that even the best high school students are kind of blown away by the level of challenge of university. It's beyond, all students know that university is going to be more challenging than high school in some ways, but every student is surprised when they see just how much more challenging. And the fact is that professors right now are absolutely despairing at the level of preparation that they're seeing among first year students. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about unclear aspirations, which I look at it this way. It's the feeling that so many students have that a degree is just a bunch of hoops you need to jump through to get a piece of paper, which will then get you a job. That is not an effective way of looking at it. What I like to say is a lot of students think that, they're going to do the 4 or 5 years. Statistically, it's 4.5 or 5 years, not four for most students. They're going to do their 4 or 5 years of their degree, and then they're going to be ready. Then that's done. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go find a job. I don't want students to look at it that way. I want students to look at it in the way of those 4 to 5 years, those are the first 4 or 5 years of your career. That's not just you jumping through hoops to prepare. That's you already engaging with things in the world that you're passionate about. I'm not saying that students have to know exactly what they want to study and do for a career right at the start. But what I am saying is they have to know how to start on the path of finding that. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about what I call the productivity triple threat, which is disconnection, low motivation, and fragmented attention. And then you'll see in the slides there's another section with some very practical tips. Okay, so this is just what I kind of call the gloomy slide, but it shouldn't be gloomy. It's not gloomy. The fact is, we're here. We're figuring out how to avoid all the gloomy parts. But I wanted to just talk about this because I want us to see how high the stakes are. A lot of parents and people in general just don't know that, for example, uh, the mental health challenges are epidemic among first year students in Canada and elsewhere, but tonight we're kind of focusing on Canada. The statistics say that something like 30%, 30% of students in first year in Canada are diagnosed with anxiety or depression. But experts believe that many more are struggling with those things, but just simply haven't been diagnosed, or maybe haven't acknowledged the problem yet. It's huge. Now, we can't solve mental health tonight, but what we can do is make university life a lot easier, which absolutely leads to well-being. Then we've got a rampant disconnection. I read the Chronicle of Higher Education every day and a couple other publications like that. And everywhere you read about post-secondary education is just constant articles about professors' frustration with the preparation of students and how disconnected students are. And so one professor calls some students enrolled persons. We talked about this last week. By that, she means some students just aren't, some students enter university with almost no care for actually learning anything and just try to do everything with AI. So she refuses to call those type of students because they're not there to learn. So she just calls them enrolled persons. Now, I don't know, maybe that seems a little bit negative, but that's how she is kind of expressing her experience. And we're going to talk about the EZA phenomenon in a minute, and other professors talk about things like militant apathy among students. What it comes down to is professors are saying students are profoundly disconnected from their studies. Not all of them, and not all the time, but a lot of them. And we don't want your teens to be in that category. And they're also resisting the core things that professors believe are fundamental to university life. We'll come back to that. And we'll also come back to the problem with graduating into a job market that's increasingly difficult and really needs students to stand out. So this is the gloomy part. Let's talk about how to ungloom it in the next year or two for your students. I just like to say, who's to blame for all this? Well, as you can see in the slide, nobody, and also everybody. It's not any particular person or group of people. There's a lot. University life is complex, and it's the responsibility for these challenges. It falls on students, professors, the institutions themselves, employers, parents play a role, even the economy and the demands of the economy, the legacy of COVID. Um, but it's not important to think of, who's to blame. It's important to think of how can we start taking steps to make your teens thrive in university. So let's do that. Unexpected rigor. The fact that students are shocked by what professors are looking for, and professors are shocked by how little they perceive most students to be prepared for university. So now I'm not saying this based on a couple anecdotes. I'm saying this based on a tsunami of research and reports, even reports recently coming out from Harvard and UC San Diego, two of the top institutions in the United States, basically saying our students are not ready when they get to university. This is everywhere in Canada and the United States. Simply put, professors are saying students lack the needed skills, mindsets, and motivation. And also what makes that even trickier is that students are not aware of this, right? Because we also have grade inflation, meaning students are getting higher and higher grades. So they're getting high grades. Um, so and the teachers are saying, well, you're doing okay, but so how would the student know that they're unprepared? They have no way of knowing, until we tell them what it's really like in university. Uh, so professors are saying that many students just simply can't or do the work or won't do the work. They feel like they need to be constantly entertaining. There's a pervasive feeling that the first year of university now is just another year of high school to keep preparing students. And professors are very dissatisfied with this. Now, I can tell you from personal experience that it's not just like average students in high school that have these problems. It's also often the students who do really well in high school. And from personal experience, that was my experience. I did really well in high school without a ton of work. And so I didn't develop the skills I needed to really excel once I got to university. So this is not just for students who are struggling a bit in high school, it's for everybody. And professors are saying that across the board, they're saying students are struggling with doing the reading they assign. Professors are having such a hard time getting students to read things now. And I mean, we know it's much of that is from, scrolling on phones so often and what it does to our attention. but professors are saying they can't get students to read or understand the reading. Students are distracted. They just simply aren't understanding complex reasoning, applying things in context, undertaking what professors think is a reasonable workload. And even the basics, the taking notes, the paraphrasing, the summarizing. And of course, we know that a lot of that too is now exacerbated by the problem of students over relying on AI, which we talked about 2 weeks ago in the start of the series. Okay, I think I've made the case. Professors are concerned and they're frustrated and they're worried for the students. This isn't in the slides, but recently in Texas, for example, now that's in the United States, it's a bit different, but not super different. In Texas, they have three categories that students are supposed to be well prepared in. It's something like like reading comprehension, mathematics, etc. They have these three kind of bundles of things they want students to be well prepared in for university. And recently, recent statistics, only 20% of students were qualified in all three categories when they arrived at university. 40% were not qualified in any of the three categories. So 40% of students going into universities in that state uh, are not prepared in any of the categories for actually being there. Huge problem. Okay, so why? Again, I don't want to focus for too long on why, but because I want to get to the strategies. But we know some of the reasons. A lot of it has to do with COVID, although COVID actually just exacerbated the problem. These trends were all happening before COVID, but COVID made it worse because COVID kind of changed what students expect from their education and what is expected of them. So, for example, the absenteeism during COVID, which I mean, from their online learning. Also, it has continued to impact high schools in Canada. There's also the problems of, in COVID, it was often no zeros for missed work. When I read about this, I was so shocked. No zeros for missed work, the 50% rule. If you do nothing on the assignment, don't even submit it, you still get 50%. That's not everywhere, but it was at a lot of it at high schools. No late penalties, reduced workload. It was a crazy time for all of us and really challenging. And I'm so happy that, you know, students and teachers work together to do the best they can, but it left a legacy of lowered expectations that we haven't been able to get out of. There's also grade inflation. There's a lot of reasons that institutions keep bumping up their grades. 60% of students at Harvard get an A. So how do you know anymore who's the better and less good students at Harvard? You just don't. Everybody gets an A. And it's the same in Canada. Grades just keep going up and up. That's why, if you want to get into Waterloo engineering, you've got to have like a 95. And that's just a strange system, right? Because it compresses all the students into like the top range, like the 85 to 90 range, when really they're not. Like right now, if one student is getting a 90, like the top students should be getting like 120, but it doesn't work that way. They have to cap it at 100. So it's a very strange system. And these 85s and 90s that students are getting don't mean that much when you get to university. Social media, huge problem. We'll cover that later. There's lack of parental modeling. A lot fewer parents themselves are reading and these days and modeling that sort of behavior. And a lot of parents don't understand the value of standardized testing. Because the grades that students are getting when there's not standardized testing are so subjective. Did they get that 90 because they they excelled in all learning categories, or did they get it because they had an easier teacher? So it's complex, and students don't really understand that, and they think, well, my A is an A, I did awesomely. But the reality is, and I've heard this from multiple professors, is that an A is often more like a C at university. Okay, so what can students do? I would say that, what it comes down to is, yeah, they should be proud. If they're getting those A's, they should be proud. Of course, hard work goes into that. But I think students need to know that the A on the transcript is just one part of university, of one part of what's going to get them to succeed in university. They have to keep pushing themselves. Don't be satisfied with that A unless it's wrapped in a context of good skills. So students they need to figure out a way that they can actually read a full-length book, which most students aren't doing these days. They can read a full complex article, think it through, make notes on it. They've got to be able to focus their attention for longer than students can these days. We'll talk about that later. Students have to embrace challenge and friction. And challenge and friction are beautiful things. They're part of learning. Struggling with ideas is exactly how we learn. And it's why AI is such a problem these days, because it removes the challenge and the friction by doing things for the students. I think it's important for students to know that their high school grades are very likely exaggerated and don't mean that they're going to be able to succeed. I read an article recently from a graduate student somewhere in Canada who was talking, or sorry, an undergraduate student in third year engineering somewhere in Eastern Canada, who was recalling, first year students talking about, yeah, I got an A, I got an A, I got a 94, I got a 95. And then when the first test came, I think she said in calculus, all those students who had 95s, in calculus in high school, some of them got like a 30% on the test, others got like a 90. The grades just don't always mean what we think they mean. So we've got to be looking at not doing the bare minimum, but understanding that that gap is there between high school and university. And one of the things they can do is always be looking for ways to be more interested in their work. And the next section talks about that a lot. But things like personalize, if your teacher says, write a paper on this topic, it's a great idea to say, you know what? Okay, sure. But could I just change that a little bit? Because I'm super interested in this other related topic. When students work on things that they're curious about and passionate about, they tend to do so much better. And it feels a little less like work and a little more like just a passion project. And they can gamify tasks, like gamify study tasks, like, give themselves points for things or a reward for doing an hour of studying after dinner, or, a streak. I'm going to try for 100 days where I study after dinner for 1 hour every day. And once you get to that, like once you get to 30, 40, 50, 60, you're not going to want to ruin that streak. These are kind of fun ways that can help students just make sure that those high grades are actually supported by deep skills. And I'm going to suggest a couple books also. I hold back on suggesting books because it's a big ask to ask a student to read like a whole book to prepare for university. But there are two that are going to come up later that I guarantee would make a pay for themselves times 100 if students, maybe in the summer or something, take time to read them, or maybe make that a little habit, like we'll talk about later, and do half an hour of university prep every second night or something. Okay. In the end, I'm excited to hear your questions about this and anything that's unclear or you want to hear more about. Okay, now this next part is, man, I think this is so huge. Understanding what you're passionate about in the world and working toward that is what you need to do to succeed. Most students look at a major and say, well, I want to have a good job, so I'm going to go into a major that gives me a good job, and so I'm going to do this. That's the wrong way to look at it. If you want to thrive in university and make it fun and easier and less stressful, you start with the conception that you're basically doing an amazing personal project. And that's what I want to focus on now. And so we're avoiding what is called the empty degree problem, where students don't really connect to what they're studying, which is incredibly common. So the problem here is that a lot of students have fairly simplistic thinking when it comes to looking at university as a step toward the career. As I've said, I want university to be actually the first part of the career. Now, so a lot of students, they will say, well, you know, I want to make a lot of money, so I'm going to go into what gets me a lot of money. Maybe business, maybe accounting, maybe med school. Money is fine, but honestly, all the research shows us that money is really not a big motivator in the long term. And even if that really is their goal, I just want to maximize my income. You've still got to do that by studying something you're fascinated by. So working with so many students in high school and actually students who are going into master's programs, I see again and again, students are so committed to taking a major and they have no idea what that major is really about. So I can't even count the number of students who are going into economics for all the wrong reasons. So students think they want to be business people, and they think, okay, economics, that's about money and like business and stuff. This is what they think, right? No, they're so different, those fields. Everything is different about them. Economics is a hardcore research-based field. Business is more of a hands-on project-based field. They're extremely different, and really they require students with different skills and different interests, but students don't know this. Marketing versus advertising, another common way where students are going into the wrong thing. They think marketing is actually advertising or vice versa. Very different. Or even getting into medical school. Students are thinking to themselves, well, okay, I want to go to med school, so my first degree is going to be biology, because that really makes sense, right? Biology, the study of organisms, that sure makes good sense for going into med school. It's not a problem. If you love biology, yeah, go into biology. But the thing is, for most med schools, you can take any degree before you go into med school. So take the degree that you're fascinated by. And then you're going to do better, you're going to thrive, and you're going to have a better chance of getting into the actual med school. So another part of the challenge is that students are not filling in the blanks. Okay, so we've got the required courses, then you've got all the other courses and opportunities that you can choose yourself. Students, when they don't have a clear vision of what they want to change in the world, what they're passionate about, what they want to make their wonderful 4-year personal project of their degree about, then we see they don't know how to choose their electives. And it's, you know, university counselors are constantly talking about how students are like, well, you know, I'll just study this because that seems, I don't know, because I think my friend took it and it was okay, or we see that what the easy A problem, right? Where students are thinking, they heard that a professor is easy, it's easy to get a high grade. If your teen ever says to you, yeah, I chose that because it's an easy A, that is actually your teen saying, uh, I don't care about I'm gonna do 4 months of hard work on this topic and spend a lot of your money to pay for the course, and I don't even care what the topic is. I just want it to be easy, and I'm probably going to forget 99% of it the day after my final exam because I'm just there for the easy A. No, horrible idea. What a waste of everybody's time and money and effort. Choose the things. Now, what if instead the student said, you know what? I don't really know, but exactly what I want to study, but I know that I love the idea of bringing people together, um, and helping people collaborate to make positive change in the world. I know that. So, you know what? What if I take I know. What if I take a communications course as one of my electives? I think I'm interested in that, and I'm sure that'll come in handy. That's the kind of thinking that we want, um, and that's the kind of thinking when as soon as students start saying to themselves, "Here's something I'm fascinated by," and it can be anything. Um, or if a student is fascinated by like wristwatches, maybe there's a, a, an avenue for them to go into that. Now, that could be through marketing, that could be through engineering, or what if they're interested in museums? That there's many different avenues to get into there. Um, Students, when they use the system I'm going to recommend in a minute, students can get there working toward something they care about rather than feeling that they're jumping through hoops. Now, this, and because as soon as you start working toward your own personal project, you feel ownership in it. You feel excitement about it. It's not just, yeah, I think accounting's okay because it'll get me a good job. No, I think marine biology is okay because I've always loved whales and I want to make sure that they're going to live on the planet for the next 100 years. You can see the difference in passion that those mindsets will create. So the student who loves whales and wants to protect whales can say, okay, I'm going to get out there on my campus and see what resources are there on my campus that might help me do that. And how do I want to do that? Do I want to be a marine biologist, or do I want to go into policy so I can, make better environmental policy? Do I want to go into law? But as soon as students have that seed of something that they would really love to change in the world, they can go out and start talking to people who are actually working on projects like that in the real world. And university advisors and relatives don't really know the students well enough typically to be able to advise on that. I've heard so many students getting such bad advice from parents and aunts and uncles and things. Now I'm not criticizing them. The parents are doing the best they can, but they're often looking at it like, okay, my kid wants a good job, so they're going to go into accounting. So how do I get them into accounting? That's their focus instead of how will my teen absolutely thrive and prosper. So I'm going to let you read these student profiles. I think when you read them, you will feel a real difference between the kind of my major will get me a high paying job compared to the growth, experiences, connections, and passion will get me a job that I love. It's a mindset difference, but it's extremely powerful. So read through those when you have some time. Okay, so what do we do about this? Well, I would suggest to you as parents and mentors, I would suggest reading this book called Hacking College by Ned Scott Laff and Scott Carlson. It incredibly opened my eyes to this. It crystallized in beautiful ways all the things I've been thinking about that are challenging for students in this area. So they talk about what they call field of study. Instead of looking for a major, look for a field of study. That's usually going to involve having a major, but look at, what do I really want to learn about the world? Don't look at, like, here's the choices the university's laying out for me. I'm just going to pick which one kind of I feel drawn to. Start in a different way. Start by, how do you want to change the world? What would get you out of bed in the mornings, for 4 or 5 years to study it? And make that, don't look at university as, I got to do what they say so I can get a paper degree at the end. Look at university as, this is my project and I'm so lucky to have 4 or 5 years to work toward it. You can see the difference, because that field of study idea brings out what Laff and Carlson call the hidden intellectualism. Every one of us has something we care deeply about and are excited about, but maybe we push it aside, or maybe we're just not quite tuned into it. But when we can tap into it, it becomes very powerful for us. We can start designing every moment of our degree to work towards something. And we can go out into the world. They call it a fuzzy problem, which is like a complex problem. Like how do I save the whales in the waters of Canada? That's a fuzzy problem. There's many different ways, like I said, law, biology, public policy, etc. But when students have that as a goal, something like that, then they can figure out how to work toward it. And they can get out there and start talking to people who are doing this work, and they can maybe volunteer a little bit. So many students just volunteer so they can put it on their resume. But imagine if you're volunteering for something you love, and you're building connections that way, and you're learning by talking to these people and interacting with them. You're learning about the hidden job market, which is all the jobs that are actually out there that you can do. If we think, I mentioned like museums before, or art galleries. If we think, what jobs are there at the art gallery? Okay, well, somebody must choose the paintings. Somebody has to run the place. But there's like 60 different jobs at an art gallery, from doing the restorations to the archiving. And when students are out there just experimenting, talking to people, meeting people, they find those little pathways that are going to excite them. And I'm just not talking about networking. Yes, this is essentially networking, but I'm talking about networking as a step toward your great personal project. And Laff and Carlson call it a research investigative inquiry, which is this idea that passion meets passion, meaning the more you meet people who share your interests, the more you become inspired, the more inspired they become by you. And then when the time comes, if a student starts university with this idea, and it can change, I'm not saying they have to know what they want right from day one. I'm saying they have to understand the idea that the purpose of all of this is to study something that fascinates them, because that's how they're going to succeed. And if they have that kind of guiding principle throughout, what happens is and it's so beautiful, what happens is they meet people. So when they graduate, instead of sending out hundreds of applications and getting 98% of them rejected within like 2 minutes by an AI, the job market is awful right now. And there's no reason that's going to change. It's going to get worse because AI is taking some jobs. But if you're the student who started university with this idea of a beautiful personal project for yourself that's going to lead in the direction to a career, then you're meeting people, you're making the connections, you're gaining the experiences that excite employers. So when you graduate, you're not sending out 300 anonymous resumes. You're calling up your connections. Hey, remember me? We did that project last summer. I graduated. I'm looking for work. And they have people that they're out there in the world who know them, who want the best for them, who have seen them in action. And it turns what can be like a year-long awful job hunt that ends in a low-paying job in a field they're not really interested in. It can become a couple of weeks of just contacting connections, and they're saying, you know what? Yeah, I really enjoyed working with you. Let me see what I can find for you. How perfect is that? So this is basically what I'm saying on this slide is just when we have the more students have a guiding principle of what they love and what they want to study, what feels, as I say at the bottom here, what's meaningful to them, what feels natural to them, what are the skills and interests that just feel like natural to them. Here's a good way of seeing this. If it's, the weekend and they just grab a nonfiction book and they're reading, well, whatever the topic of that nonfiction book is that they're reading just for pleasure, that might be a hint of what they really want to study and learn about in the world. Okay, I hope I've made the case for this. And then if anything's unclear, definitely ask me questions in the question period, which is coming up. I'm sorry, when I look down here, it's just me checking the time and making sure I'm doing okay. One of the ways to do this successfully is to always look for cool opportunities like co-ops, exchanges, studying abroad. These are all ways of keeping yourself excited. And I didn't actually know about this until somewhat recently. This is for upper level students, but UBC lets students design and lead their own 3-credit seminar courses with faculty support. Now, how awesome would that be to have that experience and also to be able to tell employers, yeah, I designed a course at UBC. 6 people took it. And here's what it was about. Wow, that's going to get employers interested. Okay, now we've got about 10 more minutes. I did promise to stop, and we can do it. This is because all of this material is presented in the slides in a way that you can learn from it directly from the slides, but I will add some nuance here in the next few minutes. So 3 of the biggest problems that we see as instructors and professors: disconnection. I don't care about my studies. We just talked about a huge way to make students care more. Low motivation. I don't feel like doing my studies. Even when we love our topic, it still can be hard to get started on it. Or fragmented attention. I can't concentrate on my studies. So let's look into each of these for a few minutes, because even if you take away one really important idea that resonates with you for each of these, share them with your team. So valuable. So disconnection. I don't care about my studies. Okay, well, we talked about that just now in the field of study, unclear aspirations section. Basically, work on things that you're passionate about, that you really care about. Okay, now low motivation. I don't feel like doing my studies. Whenever students think, or whenever we adult students, anybody thinks about having to do a big, long, challenging project, one of the first things that comes to mind is I'm going to need a lot of motivation, willpower, self-discipline. Okay, but motivation, as we all know, can be really hard to sustain, and it can be fickle. We can have it in the morning, but lose it by afternoon. So I want students to be able to basically work around problems with low motivation, which we all have. And there are ways that we can actually make things that we don't really want to do, or things that we're things that we would typically procrastinate on or resist, we can make them feel almost effortless. And it's a really amazing way. So it's not about goal setting. Goal setting is important. And as I've just said, having that context of what to study, that's like having a goal. But the thing is, people who succeed and people who don't succeed often have the same goals, right? Like the person who wins the swimming gold medal, they had the same goal as everybody. Let's win the gold medal. So it's not always the goal that counts, but what it is the system you have to help you achieve that goal. And I love this quotation. This is from James Clear in the book Atomic Habits, which some of you have probably read. It's an amazing book. The second book I'm going to recommend. Um, James Clear says, if you predict where you'll end up in life, if you want to predict where you'll end up in life, all you have to do is follow the curve of tiny gains or tiny losses and see how your daily choices will compound. He says 10 or 20, but I'm going to say 2 or 3 years down the line. All he's saying is, and this comes from BJ Fogg in Tiny Habits, another amazing book, take a behavior you want, make it tiny, find where it fits naturally into your life and nurture that behavior. If you want, if 2 years from now you want to be an amazing university student, you could start by today doing 10 minutes of reading of that book, Hacking College. The idea is that if you have enough time, a year or two, you start by doing something so tiny that you cannot fail. Most of us can, if we force ourselves, read that book for 10 minutes, no matter how distracted we are. So make it so, and if 10 minutes doesn't work, make it 5 minutes. And here's what happens. So your student, it's after dinner, they've decided they want to read that book, but it's hard for them. There's lots going on. They want to look at their phone, they want to do other things. But they have this goal of in 2 years, I want to be an amazing university student. I want to start working toward that. So instead of, trying to do something huge right now, like read the whole book in a weekend or something, make it tiny. So they can promise themselves, I'm going to read 10 minutes of that book every day until it's finished. 10 minutes, they can do it. Now, what we see happening is that it's so easy that it gets them to do it. And then when they start doing it, they're like, oh, this is really good. I can see how this is helpful. I'm not going to stop at 10 minutes. I'm going to read 20 tonight. But maybe some nights they just want to read 10. That's okay. That's all they promised themselves. 10 is fine. But if they find themselves like feeling like, yeah, you know what, 15 actually is, I really kind of like reading it. It's relaxing after dinner. I'm going to read for 15. Then 15 becomes the new goal. And that grows and grows, never pushing themselves because then they'll resist it, but doing it little step by step, just based on what they want and how they feel about it. 2 years from now, they will have amazing concentration because they've been practicing carefully, slowly reading books. It's almost magical. This has worked for me in so many parts of my life, and I've coached students on it. If you've never done a push-up for the last 5 years, and by Christmas you want to be able to do 30, don't try to do 20 tomorrow. Do one. Because you can't fail. I mean, sure, yeah. For many of us, even one would be hard. So do the one where you put your knees on the ground and it makes it easier. But what I'm saying is, like, do something so tiny that you know you're going to be able to do it every day. And then, after like a week, you're probably going to be like, hey, second push up. Yeah, I can do two. I want to do two. So you do two, and it grows and grows like that. So you're starting tiny and doing it over a long period of time and growing it. And that way we don't resist it. And you can apply that to anything that students want to help them out. So tiny habits, start so small you cannot fail, be consistent, make it something you want to do. And at first, make it as easy as possible. Like if you want to start going for a walk every morning, put your walking clothes out in the bathroom or whatever. So they're right there. Make it as easy as possible for yourself. Okay. Um, let's zip through. Oh my gosh. Okay. I've got 1 minute. That's fine. You can read. Let me end on this. Every year at Future Global Leaders, I talk to hundreds of students, and I do an informal survey. I have a lecture on attention and focus. I do an informal survey of how much time they spend on their phones. And I ask them, I say, now, I want you to figure out how much time you spend looking at screens, your phone or other screens, on the average day. Now, I don't mean for schoolwork. I don't mean for important things like, catching up with your grandma or something. I mean just for things that you personally feel are basically just a useless distraction. So get them to do this calculation. And the average is about 30% of their waking life. So we take the sleep part of the day out of it. 30% of the time that they're awake, they're looking at screens, doing things that they self-define as useless. Now, some students are up to like 70% of their waking life. But the average, at least what students will admit, is about 30. As you can see here, that's at the end of the year, that's 43 full-time work weeks doing things that they personally define as useless. Wow, it's like a full-time job. Okay, so we'll finish on this. If you'll be so kind as to give me like 2 extra minutes. How do we fix this? Tiny habits is one. Start by putting your phone in a different room every evening for 15 minutes and build on that. Or practice mindfulness, meditation. Some people don't like the idea of meditation, but meditation is not anything mystical. It's just a cognitive exercise. It's practicing your focus, basically. And it works. All the research says that it works. So you can actually practice your focus and your attention. You can bring your identity into it. You can ask your teens to do that calculation of how long per day they're on their phones doing something they define as just distracted uselessness, just scrolling around. And then ask them to calculate how much time that is at the end of a year. And they can think, is that the sort of person I want to be? Is that what's going to get me? Is spending literally 2 full months of my life doing nothing but scrolling around on my phone, is that going to end up where I'm the awesome person I want to be in the future? I think this really hits home, really helps students get it when we look at the year. And I'm not criticizing scrolling, but what I'm criticizing is doing it unintentionally, and where to the point where it adds up to like months over the course of the year. That's just never going to help anybody succeed. Okay, then I've got some tips on sleep, diet, and exercise that are super easy for you to just take a look at them whenever you like. I'll send you the slides. So what I would tell students, if students were here, maybe a few are, but I think the point is you've started thinking about these obstacles. Congratulations, that's so important. You don't need to do everything at once. Choose something. Choose a tiny habit. Start a tiny habit tomorrow that's going to help you. And you have a year or two before you start university. Imagine if you do something every day or almost every day between now and then, how powerful that'll be. Let your curiosity and excitement guide you with what you want to study. Turn it into your personal project, not just, I got to do this and this and this to get my degree, but I get to study this. This is awesome. This is my project. And I just like to say, future you will thank you. I tell the students that. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. You've given me 4 extra minutes. I really appreciate it. And I would love to answer some questions or chat or hear your experiences, whatever makes sense. I'd love to answer some of your questions. So before we do that, I'm going to stop the recording. I actually remembered, which is a small miracle. Are you sure you want to stop recording?